Welcome to Game Theory, a smarter way to play and deeper look at both the issues and individuals that shape the video game business. I'm Scott Steinberg, and as today opens, we find an entire industry in flux. Everyone, of course, likes to use the dollar word, disruption, as new business models and technologies are rapidly and oftentimes brutally upending the status quo. But frankly, issues at Infinity Ward and the social gaming boom aren't the real issue here, in my opinion. Rather, it's the fact that we're seeing a fundamental shift in the way that we make, market, and consume games, right down to the very definition of interactive entertainment. To put things in perspective, I asked a few friends, just how much is the field being rocked to its very core?
The entire industry is going through change. When it was starting to change, we were like, we think we're going through a change, but now it's changing and we can feel it. We're like literally on the bow of the ship and the waves are crashing and the wind is in our face and we're like, holy shit.
I've never seen a period like this. There's so much disruption going on. The industry is really being turned inside out. Not only are there a lot of new customers showing up and becoming gamers for the first time, but we're seeing really big behavior changes by traditional gamers. They used to just camp on one platform like the PlayStation, and now they're using a diversity of media, and they're engaging with friends. So they're doing a lot of things that are quite a bit more casual.
A lot of the established players are very worried. The traditionally established players, whether it's the retailers or the big publishers. And they have good reason to be worried. People are finding experiences and product elsewhere, and different business models are emerging that these large infrastructure companies aren't used to adapting to. A lot of them won't be able to adapt to.
We're in a radical shift in the standards of gaming. I don't think by any means that's a downward spiral. I think it's a radical shift of the expectations of the player base and of the money flow. People who recognize that and choose to adopt it will flourish. People who ignore it or misunderstand it are doomed.
It's like a complete genesis. And yes, it will be small and incremental every day, every week, every month, but over the next 1, 2, 3 years, it will be enormous. Everyone is vulnerable in this change.
Bottom line, it's time for a wake-up call, because gaming isn't a single cohesive field anymore. Rather, it's a loose collective of different markets and subcultures rapidly waking up to the fact that as retail goes the way of the dodo, there's no longer room for one size fits all. Call it the perfect storm. Thanks to the economy, the rise of free-to-play and online games, and players' increasingly mobile, hectic lifestyles, suddenly today's industry leaders are under fire on all fronts. Which makes me wonder, why are even the field's brightest minds struggling so hard to react?
Everything is shifting all at once. And that's kind of what makes this so disorienting. You know, the demographics are shifting, the platforms are shifting, the business models are shifting, the cultures are shifting. We're probably on the steep part of that S-curve right now. I think about 5 years from now, things will start settling down a little bit, and it'll start feeling like it's a bit more predictable like it was. But I think this is probably the most exciting point in that curve.
So we might actually be going through 2 or 3 or 4 inflection points at the same time, which is pretty phenomenal because, you know, most people's brains kind of work on one problem at a time. You know what I mean? And go, okay, digital to retail to digital, got it. And now I know how to deal with it. But we're going through like, I mean, if I sat here and brainstormed, I bet you could get to 5 or 6.
Anyone who thinks that they're deeply entrenched in an existing business model and that business model is going to sustain, I think is fooling themselves. When we look at the top publishers and we look at their performance over the last couple years across their portfolio, I think the writing's on the wall.
It's not seismic, it's the whole continent is breaking off and going to the other side of the planet. That's not seismic, that's like God playing with the continents.
Think they've got it rough? Then you haven't seen corporate giants' latest sales reports. But the time for sympathy is over. Months ago, we warned the industry that the market couldn't sustain so many high-priced games and epic outings for stationary devices. Genius? Hardly. Try common sense. Jacking up production costs while limiting potential sales? That just doesn't compute. So what's the malfunction? Where do we as a business currently sit, and at what point do we finally get back to good from here?
The sort of rise of social networking games, Facebook games, that kind of stuff. Last year we saw it coming, but we never realized how much it was going to transform and explode in the past year. Obviously other things like iPhone have had a huge impact.
We had this down 10% year kind of out of nowhere. 2010 started out very weak and rebounded kind of in the middle part of the year. I think that the basis for the downturn in 2009 was really more attributable to the music category dying and the Wii installed base really not buying as much software as historical console owners have purchased. The problem for the industry is it's hard to have a high fixed cost structure if you're seeing sales drop.
I probably have a different perspective on the industry crash compared to a lot of people. And I bet you if you went and talked to Sid Meier or Peter Molyneux, they'd give you a similar answer. You know, compared to like 1984, this is nothing. You know, this has happened before. Like the 1984 crash, there were no alternate business models. It just looked like the game industry was dying, and it was going to be dead, and that was going to be that.
We have layoffs at Activision that happened a couple weeks ago. We have very large layoffs at Electronic Arts. Both of them were very large. That's not a sign of a healthy industry. Having said that, I think the industry will be healthy, is not headed for doom. And I think we're entertaining more people in more ways than we've ever done before. But from a profitability standpoint, the console AAA stuff is right now not quite working.
Everybody was kind of caught figuratively with their pants down. The traditional publisher model of internally developed games has really had problems over the last several years, and the studios who are their own entity and the modular ones are the ones who've been able to hang in there, who've staffed up properly and have figured out how to outsource. I think everybody in the industry is still figuring out how to make AAA blockbuster hot games in this day and age.
We stood around for so long saying, you know, the game industry is immune to the recession and you know, we're entertainment and we'll always be fine, and you know, we're not.
Good point, as industry insiders seem to be falling into three camps lately. 1, publishers, 2, analysts, and 3, the rest of us poor chumps shackled by this little thing I call reality. Want to hear my rants, plural, about where the breakdowns are happening? Then hit up our website. But for now, kindly allow my associates to sum up the state of the gaming nation.
We're a cyclical business. I remember making cartridge games, and I remember they were wildly profitable. Eventually, the games got more expensive. We made better games. They filled the cartridges. The cartridges got packed with very expensive chips to hold the data. More people started making the games, and the business wasn't great. And Trip Hawkins came around and said, well, what if we put it on a CD? The business model of putting it on a CD changed an $18 packaged good, $20, $24, depending on what was in it, into a $2 packaged good. And suddenly, games became incredibly profitable again. And the Crash Bandicoot era of $2 million games selling 9 million units was the heyday, to a certain extent, of this cycle. We're now at the tail end of that cycle. We have $60 million games being made, $80 million games being made, put it on a disc that still only costs $2, but we're selling it through stores at inflation adjusted, the price we sold it through stores 10 years ago. You can say what you will about fairness, you can say what you will about liking the business as it is right now, but the publishers are not profitable. And if the publishers do not make profit, one of two things has to happen. Either 1, they have to change, or 2, they have to stop making games and go out of business.
It's really tough being a big studio now. Obviously for Electronic Arts, it's a very difficult road right now, and THQ is slipping. On the other hand, you're seeing a proliferation of small independent studios. And the good news there is that they're experimenting with all kinds of ideas and all kinds of different forms of gameplay. The bad news there is that they're not making money hand over fist either.
The Halos and the Call of Duties, the Fables, they're the big franchise. They make an awful lot of money. And then on the outside of that, you've got these new forces. Social gaming, Facebook gaming, iPhone gaming. All of those people are sort of around the edges of this big center. Consumers of that content are expecting more engagement, they want to be surprised, they want to be entertained, and that's tough for companies to deliver on time and time again. When you've got those big companies so dependent upon a very few franchises, if anything goes slightly wrong, it's a big tragedy.
Call of Duty in 2003, you played it for 6 or 10 hours and you put it aside and you bought something else. When you play it in 2010, you play it for 6 or 7 hours, then you go online multiplayer and play it for 200 to 300 more hours. And Activision's not getting more money for that. When you play for 200 hours, you are buying fewer games. And I think that's what we really saw in 2009. You have to see, in 2010, something to address that. And in 2011, maybe you'll have unhappy gamers paying more, but you know what? They're enjoying the game, so they should pay for the privilege.
Still, as we at Game Theory remind you, the answers are never simple. As this week's homework assignment, we invite you to consider the following questions. And be sure to hit us up at our website, GameTheoryOnline.com, to share your thoughts. Until next time, this is your professor, Scott Steinberg, signing off.